getting over a cold. I wanted to tell you a little bit about Solidarity Day 2. That's February 1st. This is, of course, the struggle for our comrades and the workers up in the school bus drivers in Boston. 4 of the leadership were fired because they engaged in protected union activity that the company has, is disciplining them. They fired them. And I wanted to let you know also what's going on with that struggle. Some people may just be wondering what's happening with that. This broke out in early October, and we've had some demonstrations the last part of last year. You might wonder what's happening now. Well, yesterday there was a grievance hearing, step 2 of the grievance procedure. The drivers are, this is one of their avenues for fighting this. This unfair, unlawful firing is through arbitration. And they sat down across from the bosses, and a lot of interesting things came out which really damaged the case against them. More powerful than that, though, was while they were there were 100 workers from the school bus drivers union outside in the cold, in the middle of a day on a weekday, that protested for an hour. And according to Steve Gillis, the vice president and one of the fired drivers, freaked out the bosses at Veolia. These workers, this is a migrant workforce, 95% Haitian and Cape Verdean, have been consistently fighting. The fact that 3 months into the struggle, they still turned out 100 people to attend a grievance hearing is really extraordinary. Veolia has what they don't want, which is a motivated, militant workforce. They were hoping that they were going to intimidate these workers. These workers are not intimidated, they're activated. I mean, this struggle, to go over it briefly, people are familiar with this, but after really trying to tear apart the contract, the workers decided they had enough, and they demanded a meeting one day with the bosses, and the bosses were there. The CEO of Boston Schools was there at 4:30 in the morning. All the brass of Veolia was there at 4:30 in the morning. They were there, but they didn't talk because they weren't there to talk. They're there to orchestrate an attack against the union, and they locked out the drivers that day. That was October 8th. On October 19th, hundreds of workers showed up to shut down a fraudulent anti-contract bid that the company wanted to do. This is who's going to get to drive the buses this next school year, and it's based on seniority. The company tried to eliminate seniority, and the drivers boycotted it, shut it down. In November, at Solidarity Day 1, November 9th, 600 drivers came out, marched through the streets of Dorchester. How many were there at Solidarity Day 1? You saw how powerful that was. On November 21st, 300 of them went to a city council hearing. The city council person who called it said, "I've never seen this many people at a hearing." So let's give a hand to the workers at Local 8751, fighting heroically, and they're doing a heroic job. And on February 1st, this group of workers needs the solidarity of the movement. This group of workers needs reinforcements from the people's movement. There is a such thing as a momentum to a struggle, and they've heroically kept it up. Now, this is happening. Actually, the reports I'm getting from some of the comrades in Boston is that amongst the movement, the case of the school bus drivers is really becoming a household name. Monday, the Massachusetts AFLCIO put out an email blast mentioning Solidarity Day 2 very prominently. On the 15th, they issued a letter that went out on the Union stationery that was signed by the Massachusetts AFL-CIO, the Greater Boston Labor Council, an official from District 4 of the parent union, the Steelworkers. So the officialdom is intervening for this struggle. Also, there's the postal workers are also joining. They're going to turn out members for that day. Their president has endorsed this struggle. Charles Yancey, the city councilperson who called the first hearing, issued on the 15th his legislative agenda for the year. The top item was a continued hearing for the school bus drivers. So there's an anarchist direct action group that puts out every 2 months a publication. On their last publication, the cover was the school bus drivers. It said the school bus drivers stand strong. Had a picture of Steve Kirschbaum in the middle of a yard meeting. So they're getting lots of support from the movement. And a lot of people know from the history of the local what's at stake, what this union represents, how they even came to exist, which we referenced, but I would like to just go over quickly. Boston in the 70s was a fierce battleground over desegregation and busing. And I did a little reading on it. It's sort of a bougie phrase, but Boston was what they called de facto segregation, where in the South it was de jure. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right, but it means legalized segregation. Boston was a holdout in the sense that they didn't have it on the books, but it existed in reality. And the NAACP and the African American community filed a suit to be bused to wherever school they wanted to go. They won, and in 1974, when they tried to go to school, they were met by white racist mobs in South Boston and other parts of Boston. The police were there supposedly to protect their right, but the testimony was when African American students got off the bus, they were spit at and rocks and bottles were thrown at them, and some of the racist names were coming from the cops that were there. There was vigilante racist violence against people, and this situation with demonstrations sometimes in tens and 20,000 people, racist demonstrations, this situation continued until anti-racist march in December of that same year. It was called by our party. The slogan was, "We say no to racism," and it broke the back of the racist organizing. It's not like there was no more racism after that, but it broke the back of the racist organizing against desegregated schools. At the same time, our comrades got jobs driving school buses to help safeguard this. In 1974-75, by 1978-79, they had organized a union. They had to strike 3 times in 1978 to do it. The first strike was just to get the vote. The second strike was to have an election. The third strike was to get the contract. And ever since, they have been a factor in pushing back the forces of racism that want to return to the days of segregation. All you have to know is that the organizing group for the racists, ROAR, Restore Our Alienated Rights, operated out of Boston City Hall in the 70s. And there has always been a part of the Boston establishment which wants to get rid of desegregation. I was in the Boston Range 20 years ago. This was 1993, and it was 20 years ago, but it was, not the 60s and 70s. And on May 3rd of 1993, there was a racist attack of a school bus where people in South Boston, a racist gang, came out and threw rocks and bottles at a school bus. And this was actually the basis for 1 year later, there was a openly fascist grouping that had a march through in South Boston, a demonstration in South Boston. And actually our party had a counter demonstration which dwarfed their demonstration. So the point is, there's always an attempt to go back to the racist organization of schooling in Boston. And this local was was identified for destruction. The former mayor, the outgoing mayor of Boston, was taking part in those racist mobs, Mayor Thomas Menino. That's how he got his start. Then he got in city council, then he became the mayor. He's not the mayor now, but he was the one who brought in Veolia. Veolia, which is known for its union busting and its vicious attacks on any union. That's what it does. Every city, Phoenix, Las Vegas, Florida, and Veolia has been our focus lately. We often say the struggle against Veolia. And we did the right thing in making them a target. They're so vile, over and above their union busting. They support apartheid Israeli settlements. They've been playing a horrible role in privatizing water. And we kind of initiated what you might call a pressure campaign. They fire these drivers. We have demonstrations in front of their, in front of their corporate offices in different cities. But what's happening is, as we've done this, it's turning into a broader struggle, not just a pressure campaign. There's two good examples. One is we went to the public hearing in Boston where Veolia was up for getting the contract to run the Massachusetts rail system. They lost it, but while we were there, we ran into the head of the AFLCIO, who then sat down with us and mapped out a plan to back our campaign. In Baltimore, Sharon Black started out by organizing a few picket lines at Veolia locations. On Monday, she helped organize a demonstration to help workers that are trying to organize a union of super shuttle drivers. Super Shuttle's also owned by Veolia. She has been working with the UFCW leadership there and said she expected 15 to 20 people to show up. 70 people showed up. It was a great, I don't know if people saw the photos, great demonstration with people holding up signs that said, Veolia, rehire these drivers, which is what the signs say in Boston and here too. And I think that in fighting for the reinstatement of the drivers, we have thrust ourselves into a broader struggle that I think is really becoming a struggle against austerity, the regime of austerity. I think it's worth, of course, people in Boston, the racists in the establishment of Boston have always wanted to get rid of Local 8751 and its leadership. It's worth asking why it's happening now. And almost every fight these days is a fight against austerity. You think of Detroit, you think of the cuts in food stamps. And just a short note, what is austerity? Why is this happening? It's part of this capitalist crisis. While production is down, and if you read the papers, they will say that there's some kind of recovery happening. But I saw an article this week in Financial Times that said the crisis is one of production being down. The banks on Wall Street don't have the money that they usually like to have and play with and invest in the stock market. And they're worried also that the loans they make to governments, to cities, states, the federal government, that they're not going to get back their monthly debt service payments. They love to lend money to treasuries, public treasuries, because they get paid. It's like an easy loan. But and they put they're dealing with people who can raise taxes and make it easier for them to be paid on time every single month. But in a crisis, they start to worry about it, and they rely on the people that they placed in government to start leveling to level wages, to level rights, pensions. I mean, Detroit, they're taking over, they're saying this municipality, we have to take it over, and the pensioners have to give up some of their pension. The pension fund has $5 billion in it. It's not even threatened. They're using that so the banks can take over the city and safeguard their investments in the city. So I think that to the extent that we can see this as an austerity struggle, it will help us win the bigger battle to get these drivers their jobs back. And I hope that people are planning to go. We have a sign-up sheet, I understand, that's going around. I think that this is a struggle that, it's a fierce struggle, it's a difficult struggle, and it's also one that we have a chance of winning. Because while they're facing a very vicious union busting company, and they face the entire establishment in Boston and the media, they're getting a lot of support now. And they are a fighting militant leadership. They're not the kind of union leaders who will just wait for something good to happen from their elected officials. They know how to fight. They've been through a lot of strikes. I'm not saying they're striking now, but I'm just saying this is a tough, seasoned group of leaders who, through their actions, have won a lot of allies in Boston. When they ran into the AFLCIO head at the Veolia public hearing, he remembered them from the successful struggle to keep open Grove Hall Post Office, which is a post office in Roxbury in the African American community that was slated for closing, and they saved it. It's not going to be closed. He remembered that. And they helped organize school bus drivers at Eastern Bus Company, which is a completely different company. And they sent a busload of workers to New York during the New York school bus drivers' strike. They marched against every war and supported the LGBTQ struggle. So they have allies in Boston, and they're engaged in a struggle which is heating up very much. So I hope everybody thinks about going. I want to appeal to everybody here and everybody in the movement to support this struggle. And be there February 1st, Solidarity Day 2. I know it's been cold, but the struggle is heating up in Boston. Thank you. What came out was good for our side, bad for Veolia. So I don't know if other people had the same confusion, but if you did, so I want to clarify that. Actually, they called witnesses, and the witnesses spoke out about what actually happened on October 8th, the day of this lockout. We called witnesses. I said they. That witnesses were in that we called. And it was not the last, it wasn't the final hearing. They're going to continue on. So it's still in this hearing process is still in process. It's not the NLRB. It's like the grievance procedure. I neglected to mention there's been a lot of collaboration between the union and the BDS movement, Boycott, Divestment, and Sanctions movement, the Palestine Solidarity movement. Part of that are local forces in Boston. We've had a lot of discussions and back and forth with the St. Louis Dump Veolia campaign. And I forgot to mention that Steve Gillis is going to fly out, what's the date? February 8th, to a conference in San Francisco about Veolia. He's going to represent the school bus drivers, and they're going to also have the St. Louis Dump Veolia people there. They're going to have people from the BART struggle there. And Comrade Tova is working on this, putting this together for us. So, what? Oh, Clarence Thomas? I didn't even know that. So, Clarence Thomas will be speaking. So that's that. All right, thanks.